Welcome to the Peoria Riverfront Museum's Art Club, and thank you for joining. I'm Heather Placco, the program's manager, and I'm excited to be hosting Jam Rohr for today's Art Club presentation. Comments and questions are welcomed at the end of the presentation. At that time, I'll invite you to either unmute yourself and ask those questions, or if you don't wish to talk, feel free to type those questions in the comments section, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. So without further ado, a big welcome to Jam.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm really excited for the opportunity. So I have I've got a couple things on my screen here. I'm going to show some images of my work and talk a little bit about what it is that I do. Does everybody see the presentation? Okay, so minimize that. As she said, my name is Jam Rohr. I'm the owner of Black Dog Metal Arts with my husband Danny Rohr, and I also own Up Beet Jams, which is unrelated to my art in several ways, but it kind of ties in. So a little bit of background about me. I got my Bachelor of Arts in Painting with a minor in Psychology from Illinois State University in 2014. I originally intended to get a degree in art therapy, but then in my very last semester, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, but I know a lot about psychology and it's really fun to know. I also got my Master of Arts in Studio Arts from Eastern Illinois University in 2015, which was basically a one-year master's program. So it was like a boot camp for an MFA. So if you know anyone who's kind of on the fence about if they want to go for an MFA or not, I couldn't recommend this program enough. I got my MFA in sculpture from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale in 2018. And as I said, I co-own Black Dog Metal Arts with Danny. We do all things metal art. We love doing iron pour specifically, so we try to schedule those regularly. And I also own Up Beet Jams. This is a picture of me and my cat on my wedding day, which, you know, he's unrelated to my art. So a couple of recent things I wanted to highlight that I've done with my work is I organized the first iron pour run by a female identified artist in Peoria's history, and that FE is not a typo. FE is the element for iron, so we try to really highlight that in every way that we could. That was in 2019, which is the last time we hosted a pour in Peoria, though we really hope to be hosting one soon this fall. With the exhibition, I also curated, or with the pour, I curated an exhibition with my friend Kristen Tordella Williams, who is down in Jackson, Mississippi. So I'll show a couple of images of some of the work from that exhibition as well. Last year, I won the Impact Award from Illinois State University. It was really a highlight of my career as an instructor, though I'm no longer teaching for the school. I'm able to do the businesses full time, which is really exciting to be, but it's where a student nominates a faculty member to say that they made an impact in their first year of college. So that was a huge accomplishment. I was really honored. In 2019 and in 2021, I was on the steering committee for the National Conference on Contemporary Cast Iron Art and Practices. I'll probably be talking a lot about how I'm really involved in the iron community, which is a worldwide community that's very important to me, which is why we like to bring it to Peoria as often as we can. In 2019, I was invited to be in a show called 40 Under 40, which was 40 up and coming American metal artists under 40 at the Metals Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. And I spoke on a panel at the International Cast Iron Conference in 2018 that was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I spoke about iron and materiality and how there's a lot of symbolic weight that goes with the idea of cast iron specifically. So this is an image. This is me tapping our furnace, our old furnace. We built a new one that we can't wait to show off this fall with my friends Laura and Margaret. So if anybody's interested, and if there's time at the end of this, I have a video I could show to explain more about the way that casting iron works, what the process looks like, and why it's also exciting. So I mentioned that I curated an exhibition with Kristen Tordella Williams that was called Fierce Women in Iron. So what we did was we put out a call to anybody who identifies as a female artist and wanted to make work didn't have to only be cast iron, but just in some way related to this idea of iron and femininity. So this piece is Margaret Bobo Dancy's piece. She's an artist in Chicago, Illinois. So what she did was take a mold of her bust. So the way that that works is if you've ever gone to the dentist and had a mold taken of your teeth, that's alginate. So another form of alginate is used for body casting. So she would put alginate on her torso and then lay these leaves inside, take a mold off of that, and then to pretty much simplify the process, you would then take another mold and cast it into iron. She had one that was iron and one that was bronze, and she had them displayed on the floor so that you're looking down on them, so that you kind of like feel like this authority figure over this feminine, but also kind of nature sort of form that was really interesting. And then this piece was by my friend Catherine Rutecki, who lives in Auckland, New Zealand. It was about her being a mother and an artist. This is all cast iron, though she's primarily a glass caster. She made this fortress piece first in crystal that has these little things that are sticking off the sides are a cast of her nipples, and then she kind of made them be like these spikes. So she was sort of referencing this idea of a fortress, but then she was also referencing this idea of an Iron Maiden, the torture device where there's the spikes on the inside and you get closed into it. So it's sort of this balance of being this nurturing figure, but then how that kind of takes away from you, and it's exhausting, but it's also the most empowering thing that you could ever do in her mind is be a mother. But it also kind of mimics her body. She's very tall and thin. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of pieces from that exhibition because I really love curating work. So specifically my work, I focus a lot on community. I'm really interested in the ways that we present ourselves to other people, the way that we interact with other people, what we give, what we take to others. So in 2015, I was in graduate school at Southern Illinois University, and when my husband and I got in together in the sculpture program, and I noticed that our I think it was the first night we were there, all of the graduate students went out together at a bar and we were meeting everyone, even though there were 3 different art buildings. And one of the glass artists told us, oh, this never happens. We never get together. We all just work in our own buildings. And me and Danny thought, well, we're going to try to change that. We really like to build strong bonds with other people. And though, yeah, we're sculptors and we're going to be in another building, that doesn't mean that we can't work with glass artists and blacksmiths and ceramic artists and painters. Like, how can we all contribute to this shared interest in the arts in general and, help ourselves grow, but help each other grow? So I made this piece called Continue Building the Safe Space, and there's a lot of layers to the content, but what I did was make paper. This is a close-up of the paper. I didn't dye it or anything. I just collected various items from people whenever we would have people over. We'd have graduate students over all the time to kind of have potlucks or parties and get to know each other in a way that's not so stuffy and restrictive. So I would collect, if somebody cut off their sleeves, I would take it. If somebody was a smoker, I would take the boxes from the empty cigarette boxes. If we got pictures printed, I would take the receipts, just collect everything I could, and then broke it down and then made paper. And then we had fires a lot of the time. So after we would have fire and everybody would leave, I would let the fire burn down. I would collect all of the ash from the bottom of the fire and I sprinkled it on top of the paper. So that's what this sort of black charcoaly ash is. And then you'll notice there's this very faint line that runs across this. And what that is when we had a few parties, I let everybody know, hey, I'm putting a voice recorder in the kitchen. Nobody needs to acknowledge it, but I just wanted you to know that I'm recording. I just am going to use the vibrations of the voices for a piece. So I recorded voices for several hours over a few times that we had people over. And then I built a machine that's basically a very simple conveyor belt. And then I put a subwoofer with a piece of a bamboo leaf, which was a plant a friend gave to me. And then I played the voices. So the vibrations of the voices played from the subwoofer and then were recorded with the bamboo leaf into the ash. And then I sort of put all of those into these walnut frames. I use walnut a lot in my work because the house I grew up in, which is actually the house I am living at again right now as an adult, has a walnut tree out front. So walnut is a reoccurring theme in my work, and it's really important to me. So I framed all of these in walnut and then put them up in a way that it sort of builds this wall, but it's a wall that you can interact with and walk behind. It can also bend and move. These are all on hinges, so it can move to fit any space that it needs. They can be taken apart and put into different orientations. So the entire piece is just supposed to look like it's always in progress. It's always shifting and changing, just as we all are within these communities that are larger than us. So then I started thinking about when I was in graduate school, I was obviously really stressed out, and I was having a hard time figuring out how to continue being productive, but also kind of struggling with depression personally. So I was thinking about maybe if I made some work that gave me something to do while I'm not in the studio, like knitting, that would kind of make me feel a little bit better, or give me something to focus on or think through. So the illusion of connecting while disconnecting is sort of how I was feeling at the time, where your people are not always just me, but we sometimes put on a face so that we don't make other people uncomfortable, or so we can just kind of navigate our way through life in what we perceive to be the most productive way. So I have these forms that were all knit forms. I called them nests, but somebody once called them hats, which is fine. I just wanted like a comforting form that can hold an idea. So there's 50 of them, 25 on the wall, 25 on the floor. And each of them has a piece of handmade paper inside with a note on it. So the ones on the wall are more people height, so they're more accessible. You don't have to bend down and kind of dig them out of the nest. You can just grab them and read them. So the one on the wall has more of an accessible thought, and then the one on the floor that corresponds to it has the underlying true thought. So if you were willing to put in a little bit more work to bend down and interact with this floor one, then you got a different, more honest and true experience. And also you'll notice all of the ones on the floor have these strings that are kind of implying that they're interacting, but none of them are actually really touching and having that true deep interaction. So I started doing a lot more knitting, and I learned how to do blacksmithing when I was in graduate school. So I made this piece as a first test with using some sound, which I don't have because I took the sound apart with the intention of using it for something else. But I forged all of these hooks by hand, and all of them are similar, and they all function in the same way, holding something up. But all of them are a little bit different because they're meant to represent a different person that was important to me in my life at that time. And then I have these knit forms that are smaller and they start to grow, but as they grow, they also have larger pieces of lead in them. I got a bunch of lead from a mechanic in town and took the wheel weights off and cast these weights that were just supposed to be, less weight, increasing the weight as we go. So this one isn't really much of a strain. In fact, it's still pretty supported, and this is getting a little more strenuous, and it continues to go. And as the weight gets heavier, it also has human hair wrapped around it, which is something that I think I work with human hair quite often in my work because it's this biological timeline. So I was thinking about, but it is dead. It's something that is no longer really serving much of a purpose to us. So I wrapped the lead, which is the toxic material, in hair and then kind of dragged them out. And then this piece I have a video to show. It's called When the Small Man Speaks, and I will just kind of talk. Oh, this is in my way. Whoop. I'll just kind of talk over it. But what I did was I bought the cheapest white candle I could find at Walmart, and I took a mold of a Ken doll, because a Ken Barbie doll is supposed to be this ideal man, what a man is supposed to look like, what a man is supposed to be. And then I put this cheap white candle wax within the Ken doll, and I lit it on fire. And I took, it ended up being 2,000 pictures that were then put together. So it's a stop motion animation. And I recorded the voices of specifically these 3 men in graduate school that were really giving me a hard time. They would mansplain to me all the time and talk down to me, and it was just, not a fun time. So I recorded their voices and slowed them down so much that it sounds like this kind of ominous, you can hear. This kind of ominous noise that if it plays in a gallery, I've shown this in a few galleries, and it always echoes really weird and sounds kind of disturbing, and you notice new little things in the background every time. But I slowed them down so much, thinking about this idea of mansplaining, where they would talk to me slower as if I can't understand or comprehend what it is that they're saying. So I slowed it so much so that it becomes this ominous, disturbing thing. So it just continues to burn down and play these voices in a loop. And this is on Vimeo. It's also on my website if you want to watch it in full. But I'll just kind of skip ahead. But I had 2 candlesticks that went all the way down to essentially the tabs of the Ken doll, and I just let it continue to burn. And I did this stop motion animation just because a friend that does video work suggested it would give me a little more control with the fact that I'm burning down this candle, which I really liked, but also it kind of makes it look a little more disturbing. But at the end, you see that I blew out the candles. So it was sort of me trying to put an end and have full control over the situation that was causing me a lot of stress and anger. Okay, so then in 2017, I was invited to be a resident artist at the art farm in Marquette, Nebraska, which was really fun and a really interesting way to live for a month. I went in July, so it was very hot. And we lived essentially in a barn. There was no air conditioning. My fan didn't work. When it rained inside. But all that, I mean, I highly recommend going. It was such a wonderful experience, and I met several different artists. So I was making that handmade paper in the previous works that I was just discussing. And when you make paper, especially if you use a blender, a garbage disposal, which is what I like to use, or a paper beater, which is a really expensive but awesome machine that breaks down the paper pulp much easier and much more fine. You can't use the seams, or you can't use synthetic fibers. So I had people giving me old clothes or giving me sheets that had torn or whatever. And if I couldn't use them, I held on to them. As most artists do, we all kind of hold on to everything a little longer than we should, but it might get used one day. So I took all of these things and brought them to the art farm, and I made this nest. So here's a picture to give you an idea of how large this nest is. The proportions of it were, the height is if I was sitting down and I reached my arms straight up, and the width was my wingspan. So I welded a form, and then I wove all of these things around it so that everything got to be used. So I dug a hole by hand, and I just had a spade and a shovel, and I went out there every morning at dawn and every night at sunset because it was way too hot to dig a hole during the day in July on a farm in Nebraska. So I dug the hole every day and night until I got it deep enough for the nest to fit in there. So I called this piece Rock Bottom Never Quite Provides the Clearest View, because again, at this time I was kind of dealing with depression, and I felt like my view of the world and my work and myself and others and everything in my life was sort of distorted by that. And I realized that, you know, it felt like I was at rock bottom sometimes, but that's not really always how life is. And there is often a way to dig yourself out of rock bottom. And for me, what I found the best way to get out of there is with the support of other people and being open and honest with others, investing in people who want to invest in you. So what I did was dug myself into this hole, put this nest in there, and I invited people that were at the farm to come sit in the nest. And I asked people to try to do it one at a time. Don't disturb someone if somebody else is in there. Let everybody have their own experience. It's already pretty peaceful because it was a farm, but then when you get inside the nest and sit there, it's a different level of peaceful, and it's just so silent, but you feel so safe. And if you look up, you might see a bird once in a while, and that's it. There's no other noise around. It's just you and your thoughts. So you can kind of see, this is in the middle of a field. This is the dirt pile. That's my head standing in it. So I was just kind of trying to document the way that I was interacting with this thing with nobody else around. And I invited other people and we all sat in it just to see. And then when the piece was over, I didn't ask anybody to help me, but I went out and started burying it. And then the people who I had grown pretty close with at the residency came and started helping me to bury this piece. So it's still there in the ground, buried in a field, amongst all this other really great art that artists have left there throughout the years. But I saw the process of burying that sort of being symbolic to this idea of people helping you put aside or, you know, burying things that are no longer serving you so that you can now get out and move on. Which that piece tied into this that I had made in 2018, spending time on those who deserve mine. I was thinking a lot about relatives are just people, and family means more than just people that you're related to. So when I was at the art farm, I didn't really have much internet. I wasn't watching TV. I wasn't connected digitally in the way that we are so much so right now. So I invited people to write letters to me if they wanted to, and I would write them back every day because I had a lot of time. So these are all of the letters that people had written to me while I was there. And I was thinking about why is the letter so nice? You know, I love letters, handwritten letters, cards, anything like that, because it's this extra element of care that is really lost in the tech movement. Like a phone call and a text message and an email are all really great, but taking the time to sit down and physically write out and try to make your handwriting nice and legible for someone else to read it and experience it, and then wrap it up and buy a stamp and bring it to the post office, and then they get it and open it and read it, and they can hold it and tangibly feel and see and smell the love that you put into this in a way. So I was really thinking about that with this piece. So I welded, the way this is kind of hung is I welded a frame together, and then I used some chains to attach it to the ceiling for the specific space. And then I cast plumb bobs at the bottom. Some are cast in bronze, some are iron, and some I turned on a lathe to make them wood. So they all have different tensions, and they all are different shapes, and they all have different finishes or patinas on them, but they all point to the space that I was currently inhabiting. So I was thinking about these being a representation of these people writing a letter, sending a letter to me, and then the string just sort of making visible the space between from them to me, and then it all pointing to where I am right now, or was at the time. I started getting a little more interested in socially engaged art, which I wouldn't say is, no, I do still do that to an extent. Anyway, this is While We Are Here, which was something I did in 2017 because there was such a big community of people interested in the arts coming together where I was. So I was thinking about how Danny and I are hosting people all the time. People are coming over, we're sharing a beer, we're sharing soda, we're sharing tea, whatever, we're sharing food. And then I had a friend who is a really skilled painter that we would have tea together all the time. She does really great drawings too. And her house was on the way to where I would ride every day. So I'd stop by and we'd have tea and catch up, and we grew really close, and then I would go elsewhere. So thinking about specifically whiskey and tea being something that kind of brings people together. So I wrote a poem about that and put words of the poem, maybe 2 or 3 would fit into these cups. And then I made pinch cups. So when I made these cups, if you're not familiar with the process of a pinch pot, which is a very basic ceramic form, you just need your clay, you have a dough ball or clay ball, and then you stick a thumb in there and just kind of pinch in circles until you form whatever shape you want. So I made these while I was talking with friends or anybody who came through the studio space. Was thinking about the pinch of every cup being a documentation of this time I'm sharing with somebody else. So there's that layer of community. Then I put the poems in the bottom, and then I rented out this small gallery space on campus and served tea. So everybody could come and have tea, and you can pick out whatever cup you want, and then you're just encouraged to kind of mingle around and talk to other people. And you can keep the cup and take it with you, with the promise of you sharing tea with somebody else later and giving them that cup. So that was, what is that, 4 years ago now? And I'm still, just recently in March, had somebody contact me that I never met. And they said that, hey, did your name used to be Jam Lovell? I just got this cup my friend gave me. And I love hearing and seeing that this piece is kind of still in circulation. So that was sort of the precursor to this piece that I did in 2019 that was called Wish You Were There, but the performance itself was called Turning the Space Between Us to Dust. So my family specifically, every Easter makes these confetti eggs, and we just smash them. Mostly the adults smash them on each other's heads while the kids get, little Easter eggs and stuff. So I was thinking about that being a really fun way to kind of bring people together by saying, hey, come here, we're all gonna run around and smash eggs on strangers' heads, and it's gonna be a weird icebreaker, but it's gonna bring us together and be really fun. And it really was. So while this was happening, I took a picture every 2 seconds, and I made a photo album that has all of the pictures in it that I decided I don't want to show publicly because for privacy reasons of everybody who was involved. But I was thinking about when you go to an older relative's house back when we didn't have Facebook and Instagram to just have hundreds of pictures all the time, you would have a photo album. And I remember being a kid and looking through photo albums, and there's like 100 pictures of somebody's birthday party, and it's like, you don't need that many, but maybe you do, just like this over documentation, because somebody wasn't there and you really wanted them to feel like they're a part of it, even though they couldn't be there. So that was kind of the idea behind that. So I was also thinking about my relationship with my husband. At the time, in 2018, we were still just dating, but we had met in our first year of grad school together, and then we got into Southern together, and we're now married and still together. But I was thinking about how we've been together now nearly 7 years, and we're both very different people now, and we both are very open with communication, and I feel like we have a really strong relationship. And I was thinking about when we're growing up, it's not a lot of people and books and movies all kind of imply that there's someone for you, and it's all about just like meeting a person that's the right person. But I don't personally agree with that. I think that really a good relationship, whether it's romantic or friendship or somebody who becomes your family, that becomes a strong relationship because you're willing to work on each other and have open communication and, find the root of what it is that's making somebody unhappy or unwelcome or whatever that is. So I see our relationship as not something that we found, though I do feel lucky that we met each other when we did, but it's something that we've built and that we continue to build on. So this is a bronze casting of the space between our hands when we're holding hands. I did bronze because bronze is a metal that it is beautiful, it is expensive, it's shiny and nice, but it also can be changed. You can heat it up and forge it to be something else. You can melt it down and recast it, and it's not a big deal. You don't have to break it up at the size like you would iron, but it's something that can continue to shift and change, just like our relationship will continue to do. And that segued into this piece in 2019 called Infrathin, where then I expanded. The bronze piece is still right here, but I expanded to include the space between my hands and some friends' hands. So I would just invite people, hey, do you want to come hold hands with me for like 20 minutes? So what I used is a rubber that cures in about 20 minutes. So I would mix up a small batch of rubber. I would put it on their hand, say, rub it around like you're putting on lotion with one hand, I guess, and then I'll do the same. And then we'll just smack hands together and push them and then just comfortably sit. Like, do you want to hold? I would just stick my hand out and say, grab my hand. Because some people want to hold hands like this. Some people want to hold hands like this. And those are both really wonderful, but they're very different. So I would just kind of let them hold my hand how they felt comfortable. And then we would just sit there and talk for 20 minutes about whatever came to mind. So it was also sort of this nice documentation of these experiences I shared with these people. So the word infrathin comes from Marcel Duchamp coined the term, and there's not really a definition for it, but what he explained is that it is sort of this remnants and this unseen thing between you and someone else. The example he gave is if somebody sits down in a chair and inhabits that chair for a while and they get up and leave, and then you sit there and you feel the warmth of their body that had, occupied that chair, that's infrathin. So it's like this unseen connection in a way. So this is kind of a gross piece, but this is called Time Only Ends Bodies. And it is a cast iron ashtray that has 20 slots. And like I said, we used to host friends all the time and have people over. So I asked whenever people were smokers, I'd say, hey, can I have your used cigarette butt? I want to put you in this piece. And I would explain what it is. So I collected all these cigarette butts from people and put them in this piece. And I was thinking about smoker circles and how like the only thing that's bringing these people together is this bad, deadly habit essentially, but it's building this strong bond that's really you only get in this kind of experience. So I called it Time Only Ends Bodies, which is a little morbid because I'm thinking about the fact that when we die, we're not ever really dead as long as our memory is carried on through other people or our story is carried on in some way with our community or with others. And this piece is about my mom. My mom is really important to me. We're very close. So I was using, this is an extension of a piece that I had that I made of my family. So I knit a bunch of hats and scarves, and then I gave them to everybody. And then a while later, I asked if I could borrow them back just to show this work. So I cast a bunch of little pumpkins, and each pumpkin represented a different person. So they were all kind of like anonymously displayed, and it was like an homage to all these people I care about. So my mom, of course, gets her own one because she is my mom, and her name is Tammy Finch. So I made this finch bird to represent her, and it is a lilac candle because that's her favorite candle. And then this is a cast iron pumpkin that was the thickest pumpkin with the way I cast it, and then a scarf I made for her, and sunflower seeds. And I use sunflower seeds because she, as long as I can remember, always when she's getting ready for bed, just eats sunflower seeds. It's like her evening snack, her little treat. And one time we were out on the porch the summer before this eating sunflower seeds, and I ate one that didn't have a shell, and it was really gross. And I said, why do the ones without the shells always taste so bad? And she said, because the best are the ones we work for. And I was like, it's really deep. I love that. I'm gonna write a poem about that. So I wrote a poem about her, and I felt like it wasn't enough. So then I made this sculpture. So something that's a reoccurring theme with my work is all of my sculptures are a visual representation of my poetry. So I make a habit to write I used to write every single day, but then life happens and I just write as often as I can now. And if there's something that I'm really wrestling with and I'm having a hard time, then I'll keep writing about it. And then I might say, okay, it's time to write a poem about this. I need to investigate it in a different way. So I'll write a poem. And if I still don't feel relieved, or I still feel like I need to take more time, then I'll make a sculpture, because the process of sculpture gives me a lot of time and space to write more and think more about whatever it is I'm making a piece about. So on the flip side, I made this piece called We Would Often Sit in Silence in 2014, and it's the first piece I made with human hair. So this side is yarn that I unspun it, and then I brushed it out and I straightened it with a hair straightener, and then I fishtail braid it to try to make it look like hair as much as possible. And then this side is my hair, and I also did use some extra hair to fill the space that I bought that is human hair. And I fishtail braided that the same technique as this one. So these are two different panels, and this one is trying to be something it's not, and this one will never be good enough to be what it wants to be. So I was just kind of thinking about expectations of people older than us, and older than me specifically, and how you're not always going to fill the shoes that they expect you to. And then this was a further extension of a piece that I had made. It is a coffin, and it fits me, which originally I just started doing this investigation about these Fisk metallic burial cases. They're cast iron coffins made by a man. His name is Almond Dunbar Fisk. And so they're kind of modeled off of Egyptian sarcophagi originally, and they have a faceplate to them right here, so that if a person passed away far from home, they could be buried in this case and then shipped home, and they could just move the faceplate for a memorial service or a funeral and put it back and bury them that way. So the cast iron coffins, they preserve bodies naturally so well that I think it was like in 2010 or 2011, there's a PBS documentary called Woman in the Iron Casket that talks more about it, but they discovered this cast iron coffin, and it broke because they were breaking ground to build a stadium, and they thought it was a crime scene, but it was actually a body that had been buried like hundreds of years ago. It was really interesting. So I came into contact with the archaeologist who worked on that case, Scott Warrenash, and I told him I want to know more about the history of these cases and from an archaeological standpoint, and he wanted to know more about the casting process, which is what I know. So we've been talking and collaborating and working together. It's been really interesting. So I wanted to make a cast iron coffin, but instead, with the equipment I had on hand, I made a cast iron door that intentionally is thin, and we poured it from down here because this has more mass, and I knew it would cool and not cast fully, or at least have these cracks that I wanted. There's a split somewhere. Oh, here it is. There's a split where the metal cooled at different rates, and then it kind of split apart, which is what I wanted to happen. So it's kind of like controlled chaos with this lid. And then it has walnut walls with Purple Heart splines that originally I wanted to be finger joints like this, but with the size of this coffin and the angles I would need to cut the wood, it was really complicated. So I went with these Purple Heart splines to kind of hold it together. So within the coffin, you'll see this open faceplate, which has all of these roses that are lead. So what I was thinking about is how am I going to feel when people pass away who I'm expected to have a good relationship with, but I don't. And I was really wrestling with that for a long time and worrying about, oh, I'm going to feel regret that I didn't try harder, or I'm going to feel relief that I don't have to worry anymore, or I'm going to feel anger. I don't know. And there's not really any way to know. So I made this piece to kind of give myself the space to digest this idea. And I came to the conclusion that when that day comes, it is not my grief to have. So I was thinking that this lead the lead roses are a toxic metal that are trying to be contained by this cast iron. But this window is open, which if you traditionally, roses are used as kind of part of the mourning and grieving process in a funeral. So I was thinking about looking in and seeing nothing but this toxicity of mourning a death that is not mine to mourn. But then trying to contain it with the cast iron. So it's always this kind of back and forth with the idea, but it's something I'll continue to explore. So I do a lot of research now with coffins, and this is a piece from 2019 that was in the Fierce exhibition called A Ledger of Who You Have Been. So it is my face in this small coffin with fabric for the lid and then hands around it that are kind of supporting this coffin. And you can kind of faintly see right here and right here there's a line, because this was poured at Sculpture Trails, which is a place that Danny and I go every year to pour iron with our friends. They have an artist residency and an internship. So if you're interested in learning more about how to cast iron or having help casting, that's a really great place to go. But we poured this during fire at night, and we were running 2 furnaces at the same time, casting iron. And Jerry Massey, who runs the place, told me that this is the only piece that has ever had iron from 2 furnaces poured in at the same time. So they poured part, it wasn't enough iron, they tapped the furnace and brought over a ladle and poured in more iron. So there's this kind of split that's visible that I was like, originally I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to braise that. That's a lot of work, but it'll be fun. And then Jerry told me that, and I decided, nope, I wanna leave the split. I really like this idea of everyone there at Trails coming together to make sure my piece gets poured properly, because this is something I wasn't going to be able to pour here in Peoria. Our furnace isn't capable. So I liked this idea of everyone kind of coming through for me. So this is a video still of a video I'm still working on, but I started in 2020 called Critically Overeducated. I was thinking about my student loan debt is just an abstract amount of money because I went to graduate school, and I have these 8 Band-Aids that as I'm burning this house down, essentially, I'm trying to put Band-Aids over the flames to try to put out the fire, but the Band-Aids are not taking care of the root issue, which is the fact that my house is made of wood and it's on fire. So I was kind of thinking about how I was frustrated with our education system and the fact that we ask people to take a gamble at 18 years old to go into this insane amount of debt and feeling comfortable with that because you are promised a future that will allow you to pay off this debt, which is very rare. And we're seeing that all over the country. I'm not unique at all. A lot of people are struggling with this. So we're not really giving people the tools that they need to be successful with the degrees that they pay so much money to have. So this is something that I am still working on and I'm still kind of exploring, but I hope to share the video in the future. And then in 2020, as the world shut down and we were all kind of going into quarantine, I was thinking, I started a business and I was kind of scared about what my future looks like. So I made this piece because my friend Jackie cut her hair, and I asked if I could have it so I could use it for a piece, because she said to me when I was talking about how I'm nervous about taking this leap to start a business, she said, you can't always see the net that's going to catch you. So I quoted her and I made this piece with her hair to be this very thin net with 5 cast silver hands representing 5 friends that were being really supportive. And they are kind of holding up this net that's preventing me from essentially rock bottom or just not succeeding with the career I wanted to have. And then this is the other side where I was put on furlough out of nowhere, just like a lot of people were in 2020. And I was really angry because I had had a nearly perfect performance review. And then the next day, I was put on furlough with no mention at all of it during my performance review. So I was really angry and I was really stressed. That was all of my income. So I started collecting my hair that was falling out in the shower, in my hairbrushes, all of the stuff. And then I sewed it into this placemat. And then I cast these skeleton hands and soldered them together to kind of represent this fork and the spoon, thinking about sort of the stress that we're going through to try to continue to feed people who aren't feeding us back. And then I'm including Up Beet Jams because though it's not sculpture, when I'm cooking, I'm often saying to Hannah, my friend Hannah that cooks with me, this is just like pouring iron. This is just like pouring iron. Oh, this is just like making a sculpture. It's just like carving clay. So many things that I do in the kitchen kind of feeds back and satisfies my need to want to make things sculpturally and artistically. So we try to make every meal pretty. And it's been really fun working together and coming up with new ideas. I've felt like fully satisfied as an artist while cooking, which is something I didn't expect. And a couple things in progress. This is a very vague slide because I don't want to say too much, but I'm working on a collaboration with Alexander Martin. You might also know them as Artemisia Van Hoe. We're working on a metal dress together, and that's all I'll say, but stay tuned because we just talked before I left for a week, and I'm really excited about what it is that we're gonna do. And I'm working on the series. Since I can't pour iron, I wanted to try to use what I had on hand, which I can pour iron now again, I'm so excited, but this is cement hand. And I was thinking a lot about when I was growing up, my perception of adults is a lot different than it is now as I am now an adult. And I thought all adults know what they're doing. All adults are always right. All adults have it together. And then I'm realizing now that I'm growing up and watching other people parent and watch other people raise children or tell kids of a younger generation that they're wrong or what to do, that it's all adults, no one knows what they're doing. We're all just kind of doing the best we can with what we have on hand. So I was thinking about how maybe the root cause of some of these toxic relationships, not personally, but just that I view is more of a negligence to properly nurture the people that are younger in their lives, or to properly be mentors for people in several ways. So I'm kind of working through the series right now, and this is the only finished piece I have so far. And that is all of the slides I have for you. So if anybody has any questions, let me know.
Thank you so much, Jam. And like Jam said, feel free to unmute yourself now if you'd like to ask a question out loud. You may also feel free to type something in the chat box if you'd prefer to ask a question that way. And I have a question to start you off with, Jam. Sure. Where do you source, and how do you even go about finding metal, purchasing metal and finding it, and thinking about it from an environmental standpoint?
Yeah, well, I'm always, okay, I'll start with where I get it. So it's always a fun hunt. Right now, for the first time, we have like more iron than we can work with, which is a great problem to have because it's usually really hard to come by. So usually my husband and I will just search on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, or drive around, try to find cast iron tubs, sinks, radiators that we can use, because we have to break the iron by hand. So we'll get a cast iron tub, and then we just get 2 sledgehammers, and we just get dressed up in safety gear and smash it with hammers and take out all our frustrations on the iron. You have to break it down into, we say, Dorito-sized pieces, like the chips. So just break it into little pieces, and then we weigh it out into what are called charges, which are 30 pounds of iron, 5 pounds of coke, which is coal that's been burned in the absence of air. So it's more porous charcoal, basically. And then we use marble or limestone as a flux, and we throw all of that into our furnace and heat it up to 2,800 degrees and then pour it out. So it's a lot of steps, and it's really fun, but environmentally, it's not good for the environment, which is something that I struggle with, being somebody that I care a lot about the environment. And that's part of why I started eating vegan, and I try to repair my clothes and not contribute to things that cause so much waste and can't be recycled. But then I do this thing that's really terrible for the environment. So I'm always kind of back and forth. And And I would love to try to figure out a way that it can be more environmentally friendly. I know those conversations are happening in the iron community already. So I'm kind of excited to see where it grows.
Absolutely. So we have a question for you from Tammy. Is Black Dog Metal Arts still planning to do the pooch pour since you have your own space now?
Yes. So we're working in April. Every time we have a pour, we like to team up with somebody that can benefit from the pour too. So when we had the female pour, we worked with Shannon Cox at the Art Guild, and she let us have the pour there. And then we donated a portion of the money we made from scratch blocks to the Art Guild. And then now with the pooch pour in April, we were originally working with Foster Pet Outreach to make little pooch plaques where people could get a lump of Play-Doh from us, and then they send us a mold of their pet's paw. We have like a lizard and a cat and a bunch of dogs, so just pets. Send us a mold of the paws, and then we make a nameplate and a little frame, and then we're going to cast them in iron, and then they get to have this like permanent commemoration of their pets forever. And then we're going to donate a portion of the money to Foster Pet Outreach too. So that obviously got put on hold because you know what happened. And but we plan to hopefully do that in the fall because we built a new furnace that we're really excited to run. So at the event, we'll be pouring the pooch plaques. We'll be taking scratch blocks where people can carve their own plates for their pets. It just won't have the paw impression. And then Foster Pet Outreach is talking about having an adoption event nearby, but not in a danger zone of metal, so that people can kind of meet some dogs and hopefully adopt a few too.
Wonderful. We have a question from Barbie. She says, hello, do you think there will be another female pour in Peoria?
Yes, I'm really excited about it. So I wanted to do it every time Arts Partners does the citywide celebration of women in the arts, and I haven't. Maybe they said something. I feel like it was this time in 2019. I'll have to check, but we might be able to do one in 2021, but if not, I want to at least have one in 2022 because the International Iron Conference is going to be in Germany, and I wanted to try to catch everybody on the tail end of the year after the International Conference so that we can bring in more artists from different parts of the world to Peoria to pour some iron too.
Wonderful. Would anyone like to unmute and ask a question, or does anyone have any other specific questions that they would like to type into the chat box? And you mentioned to me, Jam, that you're going to go do a pour right now. Can you tell us a little bit about the pour you're going to do?
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's our first pour after the female pour. Danny and I got married on Halloween 2 days before the pour, and then we went to Carbondale and did a pour that next weekend. And we haven't poured iron since then, but we usually pour like 7 times a year or so. So it's the longest we've gone since we got into cast iron. So our friends are hosting an iron pour in Asheville, North Carolina, and we're heading that way right now. So I just arrived in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm speaking from an Airbnb while we slowly make our way there. So we're going to be pouring there on Saturday in Asheville, and then in July, Danny and I are going to be resident artists at Sculpture Trails again. So we'll be spending a week pouring iron in the woods in Salisbury, Indiana. So that'll be exciting. And we're testing out our new furnace while we're there because everyone we learned iron from and how to build a furnace from is going to be there, so they can help us make sure our furnace is ready to go for when we put it on for the public here in Peoria.
That's very cool. How similar, I wonder, is a furnace for iron pouring to a glass blowing furnace? Do they have similarities?
They do kind of have some similarities in the sense that the temperature is a little different, but if you were doing glass blowing and you're pulling glass out of the furnace, then that temperature is a little lower, but the process is kind of comparable. So with glass, you're melting sand and then getting it molten, and then you can pull it out and blow glass. But then with iron, we're kind of breaking down these chips and throwing them in using just air and coke instead of gas like they do in most glass furnaces to heat it up and then dump it out. But with us, it's just this continuation of putting things in and pulling them out and putting it in, pulling it out, so nothing can really solidify because it's hard to keep the iron molten when it's this big block, basically. Where with glass, it's easier to kind of control it and keep it in there and stay hot and keep blowing glass for hours.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we have a couple more questions. So Kelly would like to know, she says hi, and how can people best support your endeavors and Black Dog Metal Arts? What is the best way to keep up to date with the projects you're doing?
Oh, sure. So the best way is probably on Instagram at Black Dog Metal Arts. Danny now is running Black Dog Metal Arts full time while I'm doing Up Beet Jams full time. And then when I can, we come together to work on Black Dog stuff together and bring in people who can help us when we need it, like for pours. So I would say following us on Instagram is the best way to stay up to date with commissions that we're working on, any announcements we have about pours, classes, projects. But if there's ever anything that you're interested in learning about that we haven't said anything, we're happy to meet and do a consultation about what something would cost or explain a process that you might want to try, but you want us to explain how to do it. We love doing that. Or if there's like a specific class you want to learn, like somebody reached out to us about his son wanted to learn how to weld. So we were like, oh, well, we'll just create a class for you. So we're happy to just kind of do anything that's needed. We just love teaching and sharing our knowledge. So yeah.
Wonderful. And yeah, I think those are all our questions. Jessica just said that she has to head out, but this was wonderful and congratulations, Jam.
Thanks, Jess.
See, so I think that those are all of our questions, but as always, if anyone has any follow-up questions or further questions, feel free to reach out and we can connect you with Jam for those answers. So without any hesitation, thank you everyone for attending Art Club today, and a huge thanks to Jam for presenting their amazing work. Be sure to tune in next month, Tuesday, July 13th at 1 p.m. when we host curator Kendra Pietz for a special presentation of their work on Terry Atkins and William Cordova. So thank you also to museum members and Visionary Society members for their continued support making our virtual programming possible. Thank you everyone so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.